Well, I want to do the same thing for data analytics, is use cloud-based tools that automate repetitive actions so that there's less QC effort, there's less analyst time, and you can automate activities, and then you can take that human capital and redirect it towards more important ideas of coming up with new methods and new technologies. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity from an AI and analytics point of view to say, you don't need to write reports anymore. You're going to give us a structured information about your methods, and then you're going to give us structured data, and then we'll do our own analysis.
Welcome to the BioTalk Unzipped podcast, where we unzip the stories behind medical progress by sharing the latest and greatest advances in biopharmaceuticals and medical technologies in a fun, entertaining, and enlightening format. And now your co-hosts, Gregory and Dr. Chad Briscoe.
Hello and welcome to BioTalk Unzipped, where our mission is to unzip, unlock, and uncover the stories behind medical progress. I'm your host, Gregory. I'm a life science professional from Kansas City. Along with me from North Carolina is my good friend and co-host, Dr. Chad Briscoe. Chad is a bioanalytical scientific leader with Celerion, and we publish BioTalk Unzipped twice a month and bring experts from different corners of the pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device worlds to share their innovations, insights, career journeys, their personal stories to the show. Please subscribe, like, and comment on our episodes, and let us know what you'd like to hear in the future. Thanks very much for listening. Dr. Nathan Teuscher is on the show today, and he's been involved in clinical pharmacology, pharmacometrics, and software development for over 20 years. He's currently the president of Aplos Analytics, a new software company developing lightning-fast, cloud-based apps for pharmacokinetic analysis. Nathan has a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Michigan and hosts his own podcast that we'll hear more about in a little while. Welcome to the show, Nathan. How are you, man?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. And as we mentioned before offline, it's our tradition at BioTalk Unzipped to make a donation to our guest's favorite charity. And as part of the Christmas season, Nathan, you're choosing Light a World by Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that also offers giving machines in many metropolitan areas. Tell us, what is Light a World? What are these giving machines, and why is this important to you?
It's great. It's something. So they're like little vending machines that are all over the U.S. I mean, I think they're in Kansas City, Nashville, Tennessee. I think there might be one in Charlotte, North Carolina, all over the U.S. And it looks like a little vending machine, and you go up to it and you can choose something to gift. And it's a variety of charities that are all over the world. You can pay for a goat, and they'll deliver a goat in to a family in Africa that they can use, for milk or food or other things. Or you can gift water or water filtration devices. You can choose what you want. And so it's great because it's through all these other charities around the world. And you go in and you essentially, it's like buying a Coke at a vending machine, but instead it's a gift to somebody in need that gets delivered. And so it's kind of fun. If you have one in, you can look up Light the World, and you'll find to see if one's local to you. And I think it's kind of a fun thing to do for the holidays and for the Christmas holiday specifically.
That's really cool. We'll make sure to have a link, to that in the show notes for people to explore and take a closer look.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that, but I love it. They need to have them at the gas pumps because you're standing there, right? Wouldn't that be great? You're standing. I mean, I'd probably hit it every time I'm there. Like, you're standing at the gas pump and you're like, I got anything to do? Like tap.
It's kind of crazy the amount of money required for some of these things that can really sustain life for people in some of these other countries, especially third world countries that don't have a lot of technology, and it might water filtration, water purification could change their lives. How many diseases are waterborne, and just cleaning up their water could extend their life by many years. So it's kind of cool. And then the cost is so minimal, relatively speaking, for people in the Western world. It's a cool thing. So
fantastic,
Chad. I love the idea of doing that at a gas station. Right? I think that would be phenomenal, right? What a great idea. Instead, what we get is unsolicited commercials blasted at you while you pump your gas.
Buy more stuff.
Nothing.
Exactly.
Well, great, Nathan. Your career spans over 2 decades in clinical pharmacokinetics and pharmacometrics, as well as entrepreneurship. Can you kind of walk us through your journey and what inspired you through kind of those phases of your career and what you've done in drug development?
Oh, so I think my career is more serendipity than careful planning, which I think is interesting because I think that's probably true of most people. Originally I was going to go to medical school, took the MCAT test, and then I decided that maybe I better have a backup plan if I didn't want to do medical school. I went on interviews for graduate programs in pharmaceutical sciences and said, I don't want to be a doctor. I'd rather do the science stuff and do research. So I went to grad school and then took a job with a small biotech company in Utah, NPS Pharmaceuticals. They were working on parathyroid hormone at the time, and had a great time there. And then decided to change gears and work for a CRO. So that's actually where I met Chad. Is I started the CRO doing pharmacokinetics, and Chad was in the bioanalytical group heading it up there. And we worked together for about 4 years. And then I moved on to a big pharma company, and then I worked for a consulting company. And then recently I started my own software development company. And I did that because the software that we were using really wasn't modern. It was created 20 years ago. It doesn't work half the time. And on top of that, it wasn't enabling people to do more work with less effort. Nowadays, there's a lot of cool tools that are cloud-based that allow us to access things and use things. I mean, we're doing this recording. None of us are sitting in the same studio, but we're doing this great recording, and then we're going to deliver it to a bunch of people, and we're using cloud-based tools. And so I want to do the same thing for data analytics, is use cloud-based tools that automate repetitive actions so that you don't have to there's less QC effort, there's less analyst time, and you can automate activities, and then you can take that human capital and redirect it towards more important ideas of coming up with new methods and new technologies, and put those PhDs to work creating new things rather than doing repetitive tasks.
Love it. Yeah. And it's funny because when Chad and I got started this a year ago, we just talked about this in our year in review recording that we just did this week, is that AI, we thought we brought somebody in, Stephanie Passes Farm. We thought this is going to be our AI episode. And it, in some form of AI, has really come into every conversation we've had. Sometimes it's the theme of the show. Sometimes it's just some side notes or some interesting news stories. But I think it's now a part of our lives. And I think anything that we can use and utilize very intelligently to, like you said, speed up automatic tasks and allow us to work on, higher level thinking, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think I actually think there's two flavors of AI. People just call it one, right? But I think there's two different versions of it. I think we need to differentiate those. So the most common one is called large language models. So it's a Chat GPT, Gork. There's all these different names for different versions of it. But essentially, it's one where you type a question or you type an action. Hey, do this for me. It sort of interprets your language, and then it gives information back to you based on that. And that's the one I think it gets the most airtime. And I think it's fine. I think it's great. In the scientific realm, I've tried to use it, and it scares me a little because it's delusional. So I've asked it things like, hey, show me all the publications with, oncology drugs with thorough QT studies. And it'll print out a bunch of stuff, and it'll link to publications, and then you go link to the publication, and that's not the publication. It's like something else, right? And so, so that's one side. The other side is that automated data analysis. And I think this is used in things like traffic cameras, where they adjust the lights, at intersections to based on traffic. Like, hey, there's a lot of traffic going north and south, so we'll let those green lights run longer than the east-west, right? And so it's actually seeing the data come in, it's analyzing it through a model, and then it's doing something. And so those modeling AI tasks, I think, are actually more valuable than the large language models, but you don't hear about them, you don't see about them. you don't see them, and people don't talk about them because they don't interact and sort of solve your daily problems, right? But I actually think that's where we need to go. Imagine, Chad, on bioanalytical, instead of running regression curves, if you had an AI model that just did the regression, automatically did regression curves for you,
sure.
then you wouldn't have to do any work. There's a ton of work that goes into that. My whole career is pharmacometrics. It's models for pharmacokinetics. If those were automated and done in 15, 20 minutes using network models, I could do other stuff, right? I could advise people on designs. I could simulate trials for them and say, no, that's a bad design. Let's do this. So I think there's a lot more power there, but people don't talk about it as much, and it's not as well known in kind of even the industry parlance.
Well, and one of the things we're having to do to be able to take advantage of some of that is to change how our data is stored, how our data interacts, our data from different systems. We need to pull it together. So we've been doing a lot of work recently on how do you set up our clinical EDC and even the Salesforce and our bioanalytical electronic lab notebook and all these different pieces. How do you get those so they bring all the data together? So that the AI can touch them all, right? And so creating data hubs, data lakes, whatever you want to call it, and they're all a little bit subtly different. So we've been investing a lot, and I think that's what a lot of companies are running into. They need to do it. One of the things I want to do, and I'm going to get on it right after the first of the year, is like I just want to find some smart undergrad that wants to do like AI projects that I can say, hey, I want to compare these data sets across here and have AI just do a high level QC for me, right? It's not it's a start. It's not the end all be all, but if I could just throw some AI overlapping all this stuff that we have out there and just look for trends. I think that's one of the things I've noticed with AI. If I throw some numbers into AI, whether it's ChatGPT or something, and just say, hey, analyze this. It comes up with trends and finds things and looks at things in a way I might not have thought to look at it. And that's what I want to start giving it a chance to do with my data. But at the same time, we've got our protections, right? With when we're in the pharmaceutical industry, we've got patient protection, we've got IP protection, we've got different customers if you're on the contract research side. So we're trying to weed through all of that, and then as you said, with the more the large language models and things like that, they're doing funky things. I told this story last year. It might have even been with Stephanie, but my brother texted me once, really, I'll say early in the ChatGPT days, so probably like 2 years ago, right? Or right at the beginning of that. And he said, hey, I was doing it was like a molar conversion. I think, my brother works in the tox space, non-clinical. He was doing like a molar conversion. He's like, you're the chemist. He goes, I just threw this in ChatGPT, and all I know is enough to know this doesn't look right. And he's like, did you do this calculation for me? And I looked at what ChatGPT had done, and I went, well, it looks like everything's right, but it's getting the wrong answer. And so I just so I threw it aside, and I went, all right, I'm going to just do it, right? So I just, pull out my, freshman chemistry knowledge and did the calculation that I never do anymore. And then I had to really compare it and find out it was just a couple of steps. I don't know why it did it wrong, but it was absolutely given the wrong answer. So that was a real life example of something you could really screw up. So
I think it does great with language-based situations, right? But it is terrible with math, science, chemistry, et cetera. It just doesn't get it. And to your point, Nathan, it's not because it's this kind of random open system and everyone's talking to it. If you wanted to create, like, we'll do this with my kids sometimes, bedtime stories, like, well, all right, chat, come up with a quick bedtime story for a kid with a castle and a king and a wizard, and it'll write this really fun little cute story, right? That's pretty cool. But if you want it to look up scientific paper, you can get it to do that, but you can't do it the way it exists now. You have to, these companies will put it together and they'll create a closed system. A company like Nyquist AI, where they've taken all the regulations and it's in a closed system, and they train the model. So when you ask, hey, what happens when I'm putting together this clean room and this and this is going on, what regulation should I be paying attention to? And it knows, and it's validated to find the right regulations and spit them out for you. And I think the same thing, I'm sure somebody's going to build this, right? Where they somehow get to the database of certain journals or all the, scientific articles that are made, and they train it, and it's kind of a closed system that you subscribe to, so that when you do ask for oncology studies on this, and that, it will actually give you the right information connected to the right article. So that's coming, for sure. But that's different than these database models where it's actually trained to look at data, and it doesn't care so much about the language side. It's analyzing the numbers, and it basically follows a program, but it's taught to do it in certain ways. But maybe at some point those will come together where you can ask it to solve a chemistry problem, and it can do that. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've thought about too is in the pharmaceutical industry, we have this approach where we generate data and then we write a report. And then we submit the report and the data to the regulatory agency, and then they do some sort of review of it, right? And I'm wondering, do we need to be heading in a direction where we don't need to write reports anymore? We just need to submit data, because theoretically, the report, I understand there's methods and stuff like that that are in a report, but the results of the report and the conclusions, those are derived directly from the data. So do we actually need those written reports, and how much of it do we need? Do we need hundreds of pages in a clinical study report, or do we just need, hey, here's the methods, the protocol and the method of analysis, and then here's all the data that was generated, and then maybe there is a top line bullet point, hey, here are the results, but maybe we don't just need to spend all our time writing these reports. I don't know about you guys in the areas where you work, but I would say more than 50% of the costs associated with a study is writing the report, revising the report, reviewing the report, and signing it off.
Yep.
And it's not value add in most cases.
Right. It's not. And I used to joke that, once we pass off bioanalytical data to the PK folks, the bioanalytical report that we spend so much time, or sometimes if there's biomarkers and everything else, there might be 3, 4, 5, 10 reports. They become Appendix 17, 18, and 19 to this massive clinical report, and nobody looks at it. Nobody cares about bioanalytical until there's a problem, and so they're not looking at the reports. And then if there is an issue and they're looking at it, they're diving deeper anyways into the data.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing they're looking for is, hey, what was the LOQ? What was was the validation information and the range? So the information's still there, but so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity from an AI and analytics point of view to say, you don't need to write reports anymore. You're going to give us a structured information about your methods, and then you're going to give us structured data, and then we'll do our own analysis. And then you don't have to deal with the writing of the reports. I think those are ways that we can eliminate sort of busy work that we're doing that doesn't really add value, but it costs a lot of money. There's a lot of money that changes hands doing it. And ultimately, it doesn't really drive us to, faster approvals, in my opinion.
So everybody else is sitting back going, how do I use it to write a report automatically? How do I use it to speed up my reports? And Nathan's going, how do I use it to not write a report at all?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And the winner is
good question.
Nathan.
Yeah.
I love it.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's
Nathan, for a small startup, is AI, do you think it gives you an advantage to launching your company versus, there's kind of one behemoth, big player in that space, that software space for PK, right? And so do you think it gives you an advantage over them, or is it an advantage for the big company because they can invest in these tools and spend the money?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my company we don't actually do AI. What we do is a standardized calculation. And it's cloud-based, and it runs as an API. Now, I say API in pharmaceuticals, and they think of active pharmaceutical ingredient. That's not it. Right. It's an IT term for essentially an API is like your weather app on your phone or on your computer. You say, what's the weather here? And you give it a zip code, right? Or a city and a state or a country. And then it goes up to the API in the cloud and says, I need the weather information for this location. And then data is sent back and your app displays what the weather is for today, 7 days, 10 days, whatever. So an API is just a request response process with a cloud tool. And so our request response is, hey, here's my data, give me the PK parameters. And that's all it does. But it's insanely fast because there's no application to install on your computer. It runs on cloud resources. And so it has a more computing capacity. And then it's also secure too, because every request and response is recorded. There's an audit trail and it's,
Nice.
Fully compliant. So we don't use AI, but what I think is AI could use our API to do something. That's where the power of AI comes in, is because API goes, oh, I know how to calculate PK parameters because I can use this API that all the instructions are online. So you could send data to something like ChatGPT and say, could you give me PK parameters using this method? And then it would say, sure, what's your account information? And it would run and use the API and give you PK parameters. Yeah. So now you don't need to know how to do PK. You just need to know, hey, I need this information. So for a small company, I think it can be really advantageous because you don't have to hire experts in all these disciplines. If we can move to the idea that standardized analyses is truly standardized and automated. And then they don't need to employ experts in all these areas. They just know they need to get it done. And back to Greg, what you were saying is, if there's a repository of, hey, these are the requirements, these are the steps you have to fulfill to get to the next place in development, it's going to know what needs to be done, and then you can ask it to do that. So I think that's where small companies, can take an advantage of AI. I think what I saw this before is pharma companies want to develop their own in-house AI, but they only want to use their data. And you think, hey, Pfizer, that's a big company. They have a lot of data. They do, but they have a narrow set of therapeutic areas that they've devoted their money to, right? And they don't have the breadth of molecules or of indications that all of pharmaceutical development has. So they're unsuccessful when they try to use their AI to branch somewhere else. And I think this is an issue with the pharma industry, is they're so insular. They don't want to share any old information that they're really hamstringing themselves. So somebody that comes out and says, hey, I'm going to take all the public information about all the pharmaceuticals that are approved already and build something, I think that's the company that might be able to win the AI battle, not the pharma companies themselves, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's brilliant. And the idea with the API, I mean, just going right back to where that whole conversation started there, I do think that's an area where companies can think, hey, I'm going to pick off little pieces, leverage my AI and my data through them. Every discussion that I have in every one of these podcasts, it makes me think about things in a way and think some different things and how to apply them, in my business. But here I'm thinking, okay, take advantage of the breadth of data. How do I leverage that breadth of data that's out there anywhere that I can get my hands on? How do I take my, feels like a lot, but it's really a relatively small data set. How do I leverage that data I have, kind of combine those to get me the answers, and then dive into different APIs and different tools that are out there to get the answers I want. It's like we're putting this puzzle together, and it's a 3D puzzle, right? And I hadn't really thought about that. I would say I've been thinking in 2D so far. You just took me to 3D, Nathan.
Nice.
So yeah, that's excellent.
And I have a question, Nathan. Is an API the same thing or similar to an agent? Do you know what I mean?
I think it can be. Yeah. So an agent usually sits there up in the cloud, and then you ask it for something, and then it sends it back. So yes, it's. I think API is maybe the technical term for the agent. So API is the. So here's how I actually like to describe it to people: is it's kind of like a Chipotle or a Burger King or any kind of counter service restaurant, but it's not really a restaurant. It's literally just a counter that has a sign on it. And as soon as you walk up to it, you say, hey, I want to order a burrito from Chipotle. And then as soon as you order it, this little kitchen appears behind you and they start cooking up your burrito. and then they hand you the burrito. And then if there's more customers, they just build more kitchens instantly behind you. And then when all the customers go away, because it's, 9 o'clock at night, the kitchens all disappear. And so that's an API is just the counter where you access stuff. The agent might be the actual kitchen that's behind the scenes doing the work. I don't know if that helped.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, AI, like ChatGPT can answer questions, but it can't go do something without having that other API, that piece of software to go out and do it.
Do it for it. Yeah. It knows how to do things, but it doesn't actually do the calculations. Like you said, Chad, it does calculations wrong because it's not inherently a math tool.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But if you had, hey, do a molar conversion with this equation and here's the information, it might actually do it because then it goes out to a math tool and runs the math and comes back with the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So we need a math GPT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I've been, struggling with also is, and this is any new technology or new exploding areas, is that there are so many different types of AI out there and they're changing so quickly that, I have a tendency to just go to the tools I know, right? And then you have to take a lot of time to sort through all the other tools that are out there. So
definitely. All right, Chad. We're kind of getting late in this episode, so we need to jump right into new news.
All right. Well, I recently ran across this article. A woman in the U.S. is the third person to receive a gene-edited pig kidney. There's a write-up in it that I pulled up from MIT Technology Review, so I wanted to share that. But Tawana Looney, a 53-year-old woman from Alabama, is the third living person to receive a kidney transplant from a gene-edited pig. Looney, and this is kind of an interesting twist to how they find these folks that are eligible for this. So Looney had donated one of her kidneys to her mother in 1999, and then later she developed kidney failure following a pregnancy complication that caused high blood pressure. So she was on dialysis and has been looking for a kidney transplant since 2017. And for whatever reason, she hasn't been able to receive a kidney. Apparently I don't know if it's her genetics or what, but it makes her not a good candidate for a kidney. She's otherwise quite healthy, which is really interesting in this case, because as the third person, the other two had health issues. And so they died shortly after receiving, but they were also very unhealthy. So they're not even sure it had to do with that. So what's interesting is what Revivicor has done.
Is this the lady that she had the surgery and 2 days later went home? I think
she's not in the hospital. Yeah, she
went home.
But and so
crazy.
So the gene edited they did 10 gene edits to the pig cell to modify it to grow a human compatible pig kidney. So so it looks really promising. It's really exciting. There have been other pig transplants, if you will. There was the heart transplant from a pig. In that case, he died, but he was infected with a pig virus. So really exciting to see gene editing used in a different way. So that's an exciting application of gene editing and where we're moving. And I'd like to get your hot take on that, Nathan. What are your thoughts on this sort of research?
I think that's amazing. I think I spent 4 years working on a chronic kidney disease drug treatment that eventually was not approved. But it's a devastating disease when you have chronic kidney disease. In fact, my wife's grandfather died of that, of essentially kidney failure. And it's a terrible disease, and there's really no solution for it. If you ask any, kidney doctor, that they make their patients happy. The nephrologists are like, well, I talked to what I knew on when I was at graduate school in Michigan, and he said all my patients die. It's just a question of when and how comfortable. And I mean, that's just that's hard.
Really
but this is pretty amazing if we can actually use animal organs or modified animal organs to extend life for individuals. I think that's amazing. I don't think it'll end up with eternal life or anything. I don't think that's the direction this goes. But if it extends life for a period of time for chronically ill people, and they have higher quality. I think that's pretty amazing. And I think this is kind of a fusion of pharmaceuticals and medical devices, if you want to call them that.
It seems like it,
right?
Yeah. I can only imagine the paths for approval that you have to go through.
Yeah, the IRB.
But I would say this is a whole different level from that typical institutional review board type discussions that we have and the typical FDA interactions that we might have in the inquiries. But yeah, really amazing.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. I also wonder, this is related to maybe some of the ideas that I think Neuralink is the company that's doing chip implants in the brain to help restore certain functions.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder with people with dementia and things like that, are they going to be able to, help overcome some of those challenges that these people have when they lose cognitive function? Can that partially be restored through artificial means to kind of help people live full lives that, hey, 90-year-old grandma doesn't remember who their kids are anymore. I mean, it's incredibly sad for the kids and for grandma. She's healthy, but just can't remember anything.
Right.
And I feel like that information, you brought up the Neuralink, you feel like that information is in the brain, but it's a matter of accessing it and giving the people the ability to access it. So yeah.
That's cool.
It's fantastic.
That's interesting. I mean, getting past science fiction into reality, you kind of wonder if you're able to do that, help you remember things that are important in people and what you did and long-term memories. Would it then be possible through a device like Neuralink to then save your memories onto a hard drive, right?
How many AI movies or AI? How many? I didn't mean AI movies, but how many? AI certainly comes to mind, though. That's probably how many fantasy movies and science fiction movies have been written about that, right? But it's starting to feel like not as much science fiction. So
right,
No, I think that's crazy that I had read something about a woman who got a transplant and went home a few days later.
Yeah,
so this must be that thing, and that's pretty crazy.
She's not home yet, but she's out of the. I believe she's out of the hospital and just staying and getting monitored. So it's it's kind of like they think those things work until they don't. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and for someone who, she gave up a kidney for someone else. I mean, we all got two. Most of us have two. Yeah. And she willingly gave one up, to help her mother, I think you said. And then here she is. She's a recipient, for whatever reason, she had a problem and now she gets another kidney. I mean, I think that's kind of karma or whatever you want to call it, right?
I know,
you do good and good comes back to you in some way.
So yes, certainly wish the best for her. Yeah, it was Tawana Looney was her name. Yeah,
that's cool.
Very cool. Thank you for watching this episode. Please check out Nathan Teuscher's show, the Clinical Pharmacology Podcast, in the show notes. And please subscribe to BioTalk Unzipped.